right about as tall as I am, maybe 6 foot, 6'1", is how tall the water came here in this area. So again, this has the appearance of looting. It looks bad. This is a popular area with a lot of tourists, and a lot of them have been coming by here taking pictures of this, thinking that it is looting. They've been shaking their heads that it's a shame that this is going on now. But I did talk to a police official. He said, yeah, it looks like looting, but it's not. Back to you.
I want to be cautionary with that because we certainly don't want to give people the wrong impression. There are police out in Lower Manhattan, correct, David, who are all up and down the streets. I know they were certainly out last night, but they're out there, right?
Oh, there are a ton of police officers. They are blocking that tunnel that you mentioned earlier where the water is about 11.5 feet. And we understand that Governor Cuomo is going to be going there at about 2 o'clock to survey and look at that, how bad the flooding is there. The police have now blocked off that area completely. When we went across the street over to the South Street Seaport, closer to the ships, there were auxiliary police there. But as you can tell, right behind me now, there is a police van here. And there are a lot of police officers here working, keeping this a very safe area. Again, we're hearing these reports of looting, but the police tell me, no, it's not.
No. David, can you show us around a little bit? Because it looks as though the floodwaters there have receded some, but we're still hearing reports of extensive flooding down in that area.
Well, one of the people at the station asked me just a few minutes ago, can you do this live shot without having to wade around in the water? And I think we're hearing reports that here on Fulton Street, the water was still up high. But you can see these are the famous cobblestones of Fulton Street right behind me. And the water is, you can see a few puddles here and there, but it is nothing certainly like it was overnight. So I wouldn't say it's flooding. There's just still some, residual water left over from the storm from last night. But again, it was all the way up to here. And the reason why we know this is because we were across the street also, and a young gentleman over there was explaining how high the water got up, and they said, yeah, it was about this tall,
so
or about
David,
this deep last night.
David, as you look in those storefronts, as you look in through those windows, all of the property, all of the, for instance, in that store, all of the clothing has got to be just ruined by the water damage, right?
This is going to be an unbelievably expensive cleanup, because if you look here, this is the Ann Taylor store in the South Street Seaport. All of the mannequins knocked over, all of the clothes wet. There's probably more clothes that's on the floor than hanging up on the hangers and on the mannequins. So it is a mess right here. And I think it's going to be interesting. When we heard from Senator Schumer earlier, I think it's going to be interesting to hear what kind of fight now goes on Capitol Hill about what kind of disaster help will be coming to New York City. Yes, we are declared a federal disaster area, and that's going to certainly help. But I think we're going to see an effort by some of the Northeast senators and congressmen to push and try to see kind of sort of something like, not to the level of 9/11, but something to help New York City over and above the federal disaster aid. Because we've heard also from Governor Cuomo again and again say that this has all the appearances of some kind of very unusual weather pattern, and we can't continue to build an infrastructure if we're going to be suffering these kinds of horrible storms. So it's going to be interesting to see from Governor Cuomo, from the senators, from the congressmen from this area, if they are going to try to push in Washington for some kind of extra federal help for New York City because of this. And it's going to be interesting to see what kind of pushback that gets from other parts of the country.
Yeah. And Governor Cuomo certainly made a very big deal about it in his news conference, his first news conference this morning, talking about how it needs to change, that New York City needs to be able to change its infrastructure because these 100-year floods that seem to be happening every 2 years now.
Yeah. And the magnitude of this, so massive, so huge. I think our politicians right now are laying the groundwork, as Dave is saying out there, laying the groundwork for some fights that are going to have to go on in Washington, and those fights in the days to come ahead.
And we certainly haven't even been able to even get into yet the whole economic impact that this has had on New York City. The mayor, who is always encouraging people to get out, spend their money, has been saying for the last 2 days, stay at home, make a sandwich, watch television, don't come out. Broadway is closed.
And we heard in the aftermath of 9/11, the mayor said, let's get things back to normal. Here it's a little bit different because it's hard to get things back to normal until we can get the lights back on, we can get the roads cleared. And again, the magnitude of this is so huge. One good thing, one good sign is that the New York Stock Exchange is back working tomorrow. And that's a relief, because that is the financial district, the financial part of this city is so important to the city. And so it's good to see that the Stock Exchange is going to be up and running again tomorrow.
Certainly encouraging news. We want to go ahead and get caught up right now on exactly where Sandy is, because we still are feeling some of the effects. We are still seeing bands of some heavy rain, as well as some pretty strong gusts of wind. Meteorologist Jeff Smith is here now with an update on all of that. Jeff.
Yeah, the list of superlatives with this storm is extremely long, and I'll start with the fact that weather records have been being kept here in the city, I mean, since the 1600s, basically. And you go back to the city's founding in 1624, and you cannot find a natural disaster like the one we've just went through. 1821, the flood record that we had set back then in the Great Gale of 1821 was broken. It was broken by a few feet at the Battery. Winds gusting upwards of 90 and 95 miles per hour in parts of the area. So just an incredible storm, and we still are feeling the effects of it. We're still getting a couple of rain bands, and with those rain bands, some gusty winds. You don't see this too often. These are all the storm reports that we got during the day yesterday. Each one of these symbols representing a storm report. Hundreds, if not close to 1,000 storm reports coming in across the area, whether it be down trees, power lines, high wind gusts, heavy rain well south and west of the city, and of course the storm surge being the big issue. Sandy's peak gust at the major airports got a 78-mile-per-hour wind gust at Newark. This was right around early yesterday evening when Sandy was making her closest pass off to our south. 79 miles per hour at JFK, 71 miles per hour at LaGuardia. That 82 at Islip, it's more like 90 miles per hour. We've been checking on that 72-mile-per-hour wind gust at Bridgeport. And even last hour, we've had wind gusts between 25 and 35 miles per hour, upwards of 40, 45 miles per hour just west of the city. Here are the peak wind gusts that we had in the state of New Jersey. Montclair, checking in with an 88-mile-per-hour wind gust yesterday evening. Clifton, 80 miles per hour, and that was really the peak of the storm, basically between, say, 6 p.m. and midnight last night. Teterboro was 72-mile-per-hour wind gust. Caldwell had a 70-mile-per-hour wind gust. And here's a great satellite animation of the storm as it made landfall, as it made that unprecedented left-hand hook into New Jersey, which was kind of the nightmare scenario we were hoping to avoid. And we got into the right front quadrant of the storm. We were right of the path. We were to the north of the path of this, and that piles all that water into the coast, piles all that water into kind of that L-shaped coastline. When you draw that line right along New Jersey and the south shore of Long Island, it kind of forms an upside-down L, helps to funnel the water right into Raritan Bay. Of course, the south side of Staten Island is on Raritan Bay, and you saw some of the pictures from there. Just devastating on Staten Island. Right now, few bands of showers moving on by, and what you'll see, sometimes the sky will actually brighten up, and then you'll get rain coming down pretty hard for a few minutes, and then the sky will brighten up again. And when the rain comes down hard, you can get a strong wind gust with that. Wave heights are still 20 feet offshore, and even near the shore, they're upwards of 12 to 16 feet. We saw those helicopter shots of Atlantic City, New Jersey, and the sea looked really, really angry out there. So Sandy's still affecting us in a big way. Over central Pennsylvania right now, moving west and then going to be moving north, creating 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts over the Great Lakes, Erie and Ontario, the southern part of Lake Michigan, getting waves of 20 to 25 feet. This is how wide-ranging this storm is. Made landfall right near Atlantic City around 8 o'clock last night. Again, we were on the right side of the storm. We kept getting that flow coming in off of the ocean. That's what made the storm surge so bad in these areas. And the surge ranged from 5 to 10 feet. And I'm not going to be surprised, especially in Raritan Bay, if we hear of a 12 to 15-foot surge in some of those areas. Buoy reports right now, just east of Sandy Hook, we still have 14-foot seas, 17-foot seas off to the south of Long Island. You see those winds coming in again north, coming in around 25 miles per hour in the city. Futurecast showing what's going to be happening. We get those little bands of showers moving on through during the afternoon. Then as we head into the day tomorrow, might see a little bit more in the way of brightening as Sandy finally pushes away. By the way, Sandy causing a blizzard in the western mountains of Virginia and eastern West Virginia. And they've had 2 to 3 feet of snow in some locations. This is an unprecedented event. In fact, in terms of pressure, Liz and Diana, this is the strongest storm ever to make landfall north of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, actually tied with the hurricane of 1938, which is a legendary storm around here. So this is the league of storms that we're talking about.
Well, and you and really the entire weather team was explaining yesterday, because of that pressure, the storm that hit us, Sandy, wasn't necessarily, even though technically it was a Category 1 storm, it was really had the power of like a Category 3.
It had exactly, it had the pressure of a Category 3. And in terms of storm surge is very dependent on the size of the storm. And this storm was one of the largest storms ever recorded, being nearly 1,000 miles across. Like I was saying, it's affecting Lake Michigan right now. They're getting 20, 25-foot waves in Chicago. And when you have all this wind over such a wide area of the ocean, you can build up this big mound of water, and then that heads on shore, and that causes your surge. And all the factors just came together in a devastating fashion in this case.
Yeah, and we can still see the gray skies out there as well. The storm is still not fully beyond us at this point. We mentioned, and Liz had pointed out, those fires in Breezy Point last night, by the way, and just want to share with you that New York Congressman Bob Turner's house went down in those fires in Breezy Point. The congressman and his wife were able to get out to safety. They were actually in the home up until the late stages of that storm, but they did get out. But you saw those flames and the fire burning. Jeff Pegues was out there covering that for us, and Congressman Bob Turner's home, one of the casualties there, but the congressman and his wife are okay.
Yeah, and Mayor Bloomberg saying 80 homes were destroyed in that one fire last night. A total of 23 serious fires that happened in and around New York City during the height of Sandy. We want to get back out to our reporters who are in the field. Anthony Johnson has been in Long Branch, New Jersey all morning long, but Anthony, I understand you have headed north, and now that you are in, is it Monmouth Beach? Is that where you are now?
That's right. It's Monmouth Beach. This is the Channel Boat Club, and it is a mess. I think we were talking about it a little bit earlier. It looks like some of the boats were tossed around like toys. This is the post-haste. This is the one where we started to show you a little bit earlier today. This boat was actually taken out of the water, and it was put on blocks about 100 yards from where we are standing. When the tidal wave came in, it picked the boat up and then put it back into the water. You can see it's on this perch right here. Only thing that's holding it up here, if you don't mind me showing it to you, is this rope that somebody tied the boat onto the dock with. And of course, it's caught a little bit underneath. But that dock, let's show you the dock. It is ripped up. It's torn to shreds. You can see all the water. You can see all the debris in here, but you can see how that dock is all ripped up. Several other boats that are out here, they have been tossed around too. There's one about the third boat up in this line. You might be able to see it looks like it's tipped to its side. That's because it is tipped to its side. And then when you go out further and look at the boats, you notice that one out there is capsized. Several other boats out here, you can see they've been tossed and turned. Many of the boat owners are now coming out here to assess the damage. One boat owner, I just talked to him for a few seconds. He told me that he came out here to find out where his boat is. He has no clue where his boat is. And that's a restaurant over there with a green awning. That restaurant reopened after Hurricane Irene back in April. It looks like that restaurant was badly, badly damaged. We're going to walk our way past this yellow Jeep, and you're going to see that there is a boat in the front door. That boat was picked up and lifted and now is parked right at the front door of the new restaurant, or this restaurant that just reopened. We're going to take you around and show you another scene. These are all very dramatic scenes. The boats were all parked out there. You see those blocks and those metal pieces out there? All the boats were lifted up. They were parked over there. People had gotten them out the water. They had heeded the warning. There's only a couple of boats left. When the water came in, it picked those boats up, lifted them, and pushed them out to sea. And a couple of the boats, I don't know if you can see this, but they're wrapped up behind the big yacht. There are a couple of boats that are wrapped up. You notice there's a fence there? Well, those boats were actually lifted over the fence and parked into the yard of the high-rise building over there. It just tells you about the force of the water. And watching these owners come out here, they are absolutely amazed by the amount of devastation down here at the dock. They can't believe what has happened. A lot of them took every precaution they possibly could to save their boats, and their boats are gone in some cases. A lot of the owners are telling me they don't know where their boats are. They simply floated away. So they're out here trying to find out how much damage they've had to their boats or where their boats are. So this is just part of the devastation down here in the Dock Club, and these folks are very upset. They're very frustrated. The owner of this restaurant, she is very upset about the situation, but she says, what can they do? They didn't realize that it was going to be this bad, but now they say they have to try to rebuild once again. You can see this is something that's hard to believe. Look at that, a boat in the door of the restaurant.
Anthony? Anthony.
That's absolutely amazing.
Anthony, I know all those boat owners are checking their insurance policies right now.
Certainly.
You know, Dave Evans in Lower Manhattan was able to show us kind of the high water line on the buildings down there. Do you have any sense of what the high water line was on that building behind you?
It's probably the door handle. I think from what I can see, the door handle would be the high water mark. But you know what? If I'm looking at that fence in the back over here, too. This is where the yacht is, back over to that fence there. That looks like a good 6-7 foot high fence. So at some point in time, the water must have gotten high enough to lift those boats over that fence and then drop them in the yard where the high rise is. I mean, the water must have had a water line, and then there must have been waves and waves and surges and kept pushing those boats up higher, and then finally over, and then they came to park on the other side of the fence. That is a tremendous amount of force.
Have you had a chance to talk to any of the boat owners at this point? And, you know, what do you do? How do they move the boats? I mean, do they have any thoughts on what they're going to do after they talk to their insurance agent?
Well, the first boat that we were talking about, there's a little bit of a sad story that goes with that one. We talked to a woman who's a friend of the owners. We understand the man that owns the boat was getting ready to try to go ahead and sell the boat. He was dealing with an illness, and the wife and the family, they really wanted to go ahead and try to sell that boat. You can see it's in relatively bad shape. When my colleague out here, Kelvin Story, he ventured and looked under the boat to see how much damage. He didn't notice any damage underneath. He was just trying to see if there was any hole in the bottom. He didn't see anything like that, but you got to imagine that boat's in a pretty tough position over there. It's probably going to be tough to lift it out of there and may suffer some damage when they try to pick it up out of the water. They haven't even started to think about insurance. They're just getting down here to see what the damage looks like. And like I said, one boat owner is saying to me, hey, my boat was parked over here. I don't know where it is. I have no clue. So they are actually looking to find out if their boat is still up here on the marina, if it's flipped over somewhere, or simply drifted off to sea.
Unfortunately, a lot of the boat owners, I'm sure, are probably going through the exact same thing. Tough situation for those folks there.
The losses are just staggering. They are just staggering.
All right, Anthony Johnson in Monmouth Beach. We're going to head from New Jersey now and go over to Long Island, and that's where Kristen Thorne is. And Kristen, an encouraging sign. Some businesses open you have found a Dunkin' Donuts that has been able to open up this morning.
Thankfully, she can get some coffee.
Exactly.
We did, and there is some life out here. Exactly, there is some life out here, and I know these pictures aren't as dramatic as what we've been seeing, but look, this is part of life too. Look at all the people waiting in line, right? Coffee, everyone's coming to get coffee, right? Yeah. Coffee and donuts, and this lovely couple. Excuse me, sir, I have to talk to them if you don't mind. Thank you. So, Central Ice Slip, you came all the way here.
Yeah, it's really bad. No power. We went to Wallbounds. It's out. So I've been without power since 6 o'clock yesterday, and it's really bad.
Oh my goodness. And you just come. What are you going to get here today? What's going to be the choice?
Probably some coffee, maybe some pumpkin spice coffee. Yeah, haven't had that in a couple of days. So
I know.
Yep.
I know. And how's your house, your apartment, everything okay, or what's the deal?
Everything's okay. My house is fine, but my neighbor across the street, a tree went down on the driveway, so pretty much they have no access to get inside the house right now. It's really bad over there.
All right, well, you guys stay safe out there, okay? I'm going to let some people come out. We're creating traffic issues here because, again, there are so many few places that are open that people are just crowding all over the place. Pete, let's come over here and see if we can film through the window here. We can't go in because it's too crowded, but look, that is wrapped around. The line is wrapped around in there, and this has been going on for hours since we've been here. The 7-Elevens, the bagel places, any place that is open, the deli place. I mean, you know, it's uncomfortable. We all know it's uncomfortable living without power. You want your coffee in the morning. Who's over here? Who do I have over here? I know you just woke up, right? Just woke up, right? All right, what are we getting today?
Coffee.
Coffee.
Already. Yeah.
What's going on at your house?
Well, it was like up to my deck last night, like it was about to flood. Yeah, no shoes.
I know. Why no shoes?
I didn't know we were gonna come at first.
Okay. No, that's all right. That's all right. And you guys over here, what's going on at your place?
We have some trees back down, came down our yard. We got to clean that up. And a fence, and that's about it.
Okay.
We lucked out. We expected a lot worse than that.
All right. And you have power or what?
Yeah, we have
We came on
power.
at 4 o'clock this morning. We came on.
Oh, nice.
We just came here for some donuts.
Right. Even people who need it.
Yes.
Need food. I get it. I get it.
My sister's coming over from Farmingville because she's got no power, so she's come over to take a shower. So
All right, there you go.
we're helping out the family like anybody else would do.
Exactly. All right, thank you guys. Let's take one last look, Pete, if we can, at this this line here. We're trying not to create traffic issues. It is. The line's getting a little better. It's moving. It's moving. That's what I hear from people. But I have to tell you guys, one thing I've been hearing from people, and you'll probably hear people talking about this all day, is everyone's just kind of helping each other out. I was in the Dunkin' here before, and I heard a lady say to another lady, "How are you? How's your house?" Even people who don't really know each other necessarily. Everyone's just kind of checking in with each other. How are you doing? How's your family? How's your house? Do you need help with anything? I mean, it's really good to see this. Back to you guys.
Say, considering what we've all been through in the last 24 hours, it's those little moments that, can certainly go a long way. I have to say, the two scenes that you showed us just now are really kind of pictures of happiness. I know as I was coming into work this morning, there was a Dunkin' Donuts opened up on the Upper West Side, and that was a picture of happiness for everyone on the Upper West Side. And they didn't have very many donuts, but they had hot, fresh coffee.
Exactly.
And what it is about a hot cup of coffee that's just the best thing in the world
Exactly.
after a storm like this. Okay, thank you, Kristen, for that. I hope you got a cup of coffee as well out of that. We've got Sarah Wallace for us, and she's been in Little Ferry, and she's been there for hours now because the rescue operation has been ongoing there, although it looks like it's quieted down a little bit. Sarah, tell us what's going on there.
It has quieted down a little bit, but sporadically we're still seeing vehicles and boats pulling out people. As a matter of fact, you can see that military truck, that 5-ton truck, just going around the corner. You can still see, though, the boats on standby waiting for a call to see if anybody else needs to be rescued. It has been a steady stream of people being pulled out. And let me walk you back over here. You can see those people waiting to get into a truck to be taken to the Teterboro shelter. That's the nearest shelter. All of those people ordered out this morning. Basically, the rescuers arrived and said, get what you can, pull out what you can, and get out right now. People were telling us that they had 8 feet of water just surge in last night. It came from nowhere, and we also are told by the chief here that there was a levee break. So that obviously is why it was so sudden, so serious, and they had absolutely nowhere to go. So again, staging area right now, it has slowed off a little bit, but those people waiting to be taken, some of them actually have been waiting here for hours, and these people now actually being pulled off. Actually, this truck just arrived, these people getting off, so they're offloaded here so those vehicles can go back in. They will then wait to be taken to the shelter area, many of them carrying their pets, lots of little kids, lots of elderly people, some in wheelchairs. It's really been a very, very dramatic scene all day as we've been showing you this video.
Sarah, I'm looking at that gentleman with just his socks on, and I'm noting these people with their bags. They've got plastic bags. They've grabbed what they can out of their homes. What kind of things are people grabbing out of their houses? Do you know?
Well, as you both know, your parents. So what are the first thing you're going to take?
Well,
you're going to
grab your children and your pets. Yeah.
Yeah. You grab those, and then medication. But you grab those pictures.
The
and the problem
that's what I was
is,
thinking.
That's such a difficult situation. And I think that the thing is, people know here in Little Ferry, we've all seen it, it does flood, but they had no idea of the magnitude. People thought that they would be able to wait this one out, and then last night the lights went out, and then that sound, the freight train coming through, and they absolutely had nowhere to go. And as earlier we spoke with a family, they have 3 houses on one block, the entire family. They had 6 cars, and all of that was lost. And they just, they really had nowhere to go. And this morning the rescuers said, you've got to get out. Actually, the chief's here, just happens to be here again. Poor the chief is exhausted. I'm grabbing him every time for a live update. But chief, just tell me what you can. What's the very latest?
The very latest is we took another 100 or so people out. The high-wheel vehicles are working very well together with the boats. The boats have a couple side streets that are full. They bring them out to the main street, and then they're getting loaded on the high-wheel vehicles. We're moving a lot of people, getting a lot of people in the shelters. as the darkness is starting to come in the afternoon, people are starting to wonder about tonight, and they really want to, no food, no water, and no electricity. They want to go to the shelter, so more and more people are coming out.
All right, and I have a question for you, because as night falls, that's obviously a concern for safety. How do you secure this area, and will there be a curfew?
That I would not know. That would be up to the mayor and the police department. They would probably have a curfew if that's needed. We can't stop the people from coming back, but for their safety, we urge them to seek safety in the shelter. And what we do is we will stop operations during the night unless it's an extreme emergency.
You also mentioned, we're seeing some of the vehicles get through now with the tide has seemingly subsided a little bit, but you mentioned that with high tide, the problem is going to get exacerbated again.
Right, the river's going to rise again, it's going to come back again, so what's gone down is going to come back in, and that's what the residents are worried about. It'll be a couple days before the actual river really starts lowering down below the break in their levee.
All right, Chief, again, we're going to let you get back to work. It's been a very, very busy time. Amazing rescue effort here, and a really multi-jurisdictional effort by so many different rescue agencies. And again, what they're doing is these people are getting off, they're getting their names, they're getting all their vital information, and then they're getting online to be taken to the shelter, the high school near Teterboro. Okay. So, as we said, an ongoing effort, and okay, it's really been so dramatic today.
Okay, Sarah, we've got more questions for you, but we're going to come back to you in a little bit, because we have New York's senior Senator Chuck Schumer on the phone with us right now. And Senator, have you been touring some of these areas in the last hour or two since we've last heard from you?
The mayor and I and Speaker Quinn took a helicopter tour of some of the hardest hit areas.
What did you see?
Can you describe it to us?
Yeah, and it's terrible in some places, and then you look 2 blocks away and it looks fine. Obviously, if the basements of houses are flooded, you can't see that from the air. But, for instance, the Rockaways, first the boardwalk, it looks like some monster came in and just picked it up and threw it away. The boardwalk is mostly gone. Not that just a few pieces are in trouble. It's 3/4 just devastated. And then over Breezy Point, there's like a 4 or 5 block area that's completely burnt out and still smoldering. Very, very devastating.
Senator?
They're a little...
I don't mean to interrupt, because I wish our viewers could see this, and we're hoping to get our newscopter up at some point so we can show them this. But I have to wonder, as you and the mayor are going over this and seeing all of this devastation, what was the mayor saying he needs from you, and what are you going to go to Washington and ask for?
Well, the good news is that there's been a tradition that goes back over 100 years where the federal government provides disaster relief. And it's very generous. 75% of costs are paid for by the federal government, not just the debris cleanup, although that is part of it, but damage and structure to roads and city buildings and bridges and tunnels all get paid for. 75% by the federal government, and then the remaining 25 is usually split between the state and the locality. So we're going to have to gear up for that, because obviously this is going to be in the billions of dollars. In addition, I think what we're going to find in the next few days is one of the sort of quieter but more widespread is homes flooding. Huge numbers of homes are flooded in the Rockaways and Staten Island and the southern portions of Brooklyn. And FEMA does provide some relief for those folks, too. So it's going to be our first job is to try and help in certain ways. I was able to get the DOT, Department of Transportation, to free up 200 crews and their equipment, people who know how to deal with power lines. We had to go as far as California to get those to come in. I've talked to the head of Caterpillar to get 200 generators, and told the head of NYU that they could use some of those. So in the first instance, the federal government sort of plugs the holes that the city and the state and the communities can't fill themselves or need augmentation. But our biggest job is going to be getting the reimbursement, because this would be a huge burden on taxpayers if the federal government didn't step in.
Senator, if you heard the governor talk earlier today, he was talking about how once we get beyond this huge task of cleaning up, there's another huge task of rebuilding infrastructure, so that when we are hit with another disaster like this, that the city is better prepared for it. So how are you going to go about doing that in Washington?
Well, there is FEMA funding provides two things. You know, if there's an existing bridge that has some damage, there'll be damage to repair it. But let's say there's a place that always floods. They do provide money to redo that area in a way that would make it immune to the next flood, or at least much stronger against the next flood. So there are these programs now. We're going to have to make sure there's adequate money in the FEMA budget. We've allocated $3.6 billion in September when we did our FEMA allocation. I'm not sure that'll be enough. We'll have to wait till the governor and mayors and localities toll it up. But you could easily see where it would be more money than that.
Okay, when you
By
say...
the way, it also affects the MTA. It reimburses the MTA and the Port Authority
I want you to,
well.
Thank you, Senator. And just let me say, for viewers who are watching us right now, you're seeing live pictures from Little Ferry of rescues and of people being brought out of their homes. Going back to that number of $3.6 billion, you're saying higher. I mean, it would seem it would be much higher than that. Could you say it could go?
Well, I don't want to throw. I don't want to throw around numbers.
Okay.
It's a little premature, but this is in the billions of dollars. There is no question about that.
So
you know, some of the damage might be able to be repaired, like when salt water hits the switches of our subways. You can scrape the salt off, and in 95% of the cases it works. But what about the 5% it doesn't when you need a whole new switch?
Exactly.
Those are the kinds of questions we don't know the answer to yet.
As you look at this, and you look at the power situation, the transportation situation, what stands out to you as the priority right now in terms of getting this city back on its feet?
Well, the first priority is to get the trains running and the electric power back on. And in that way, we're trying to help immediately with some of the things I mentioned, getting generators here. And there are crews from the Army Corps of Engineers who are expert at separating trees from wires and stuff like that, who can help the utility crews, particularly in the smaller localities. But then after that, it'll be rebuilding. And that's a much longer-term process. Now, New York showed we're resilient. You know, we've been through 9/11, which was a worse tragedy. Thank God the number of lives lost is very much smaller. But we need to show the same national unity. And so one bit of good news, I've gotten calls from close to 10 of my colleagues today saying, any way I can help, I understand your pain. And that was a good sign.
What do you want to
talk to them.
Senator, what do you want to say to New Yorkers right now who are listening? You know, this is a great state, great people who show a lot of patience
we're the toughest around.
What do you say? What do you say to folks?
Well, what I say to New Yorkers is, you know, we are the toughest around, and God works in ways we don't understand. Life is not a bowl of cherries. But New York often shows its best when we're under duress. And so far, New Yorkers that I've talked to in both the hit areas and the not-hit areas have shown that kind of resolve and that toughness. Just remember, the days after the World Trade Center hit, we thought Lower Manhattan would be a ghost town. And we moved back bigger and better and stronger than ever. And I think we can say the same for this. We'll be bigger, better, and stronger from this.
Senator, before we let you go, just one quick question. You mentioned 9/11, you mentioned Ground Zero. One of the most dramatic pictures that we saw yesterday was all the seawater coming into Ground Zero. Have you had a chance to tour that site today?
I have not. No, I've mainly been in Queens and Brooklyn and Staten Island. I do hope to tour it. And again, there's a federal responsibility here, and I hope to make sure that our federal legislators step up to the plate.
Okay, Senator Chuck Schumer, New York senior senator who's just toured areas. Thank you, Senator, for all you are doing. And we're going to go now.
Thank you for spreading the word. I see you've been on TV a long time, so I hope you get a little rest.
Thank you, Senator.
We appreciate
Thank you very much.
Thanks, and we will be on the air for a long time to help the city and the entire tri-state area get through the aftermath of Sandy. We're going to head out to Long Island now, into Long Beach, where there has been a do not consume water order that has been in effect since late last night in the Long Beach area, and that's where Eyewitness News reporter NJ Burkett is. And NJ, you brought us some of the most dramatic pictures that we saw last night.
Yeah, you know, I have to say, Long Beach, Long Island is devastated. No power, no running water, no sewage, no sanitation. This city of 38,000 people on the Atlantic Ocean is now virtually unlivable. We're talking about massive damage from flooding that is widespread. We're talking about homes that were flooded on the first story up to the ceilings. I don't think that very few, that any cars, I mean very few if any, survived all of this simply because the power of the ocean coming from down here all the way down National Boulevard, and we showed you that last night, came all the way down into the center of town. The bay overflowed the seawalls and met the ocean in the center of town and then flooded out the center of town. I want to give you a sense of the force of the Atlantic Ocean coming through. You can see this sign was just simply knocked over by the floodwaters and is obviously now covered with stuff, and you can see all of this here. This is debris that came from the hotel, which is 2 blocks away, washed down the street. Cars everywhere, debris everywhere, and now, you know, people are looking to get off of Long Beach. They were told to evacuate. Many people, in my estimation, from my conversations I've had with people, many people chose to stay, and clearly now they're regretting it. I want to show you some pictures that we made about 90 minutes ago. The National Guard has now moved into Long Beach to try to assist the local authorities. This was a promise that had been made, and they are now moving through the streets trying to see what they can do to assist the people who live here. Again, no sewage, no sanitation, no clean drinking water. So the city, as I said, virtually unlivable at this point. And because it's unlivable, you now have a flood of refugees who are now essentially crossing the Long Beach Bridge on their own to try to get out of Long Beach, because you can't drive in, and people don't have vehicles, so they're walking across the bridge with whatever belongings they can take with them. It's a very dire situation here at the moment. People are saying they need generators. People are saying that they need clean drinking water. It's a very difficult situation. It's unfolding now in Long Beach, and they're hoping that they can get further assistance. They've got assistance from National Guard. It's clear to me that they're going to need more, and that this storm was underestimated to a very large degree by a lot of the people who chose to stay here. Yeah. I am hearing that more people stayed here and tried to weather this storm than stayed for Irene, and 30% of the city stayed for Irene. So I think we're going to end up with more people who stuck this one out. And it was really depressing, I have to say, to see people with their children and strollers and their belongings, you know, essentially as refugees, crossing the bridge to try to get out of here.
NJ,
really
here's a question I have for you, because the water problem there is phenomenal and seems to be just in that area. Help us to understand why the water problem is happening there, and why it is that residents cannot not only drink the water, they can't even boil the water and then work with it or use it, right?
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. You can't do that. You can't do anything with the water. You can't touch the water, essentially. And the reason for that is that the water plant got flooded out. The pumps don't work. They can't pump any water through the pipes, so there's no water pressure. So even if you get water, you can't drink it because it's contaminated, because it's now been contaminated with seawater, with water from the sewers. All of that stuff ends up getting backed up into the system. I mean, it's a huge mess. You can't live in this city now anymore, and people are starting to realize that. I mean, you see the cars driving by now. These are people who have managed to get their cars started. They're fortunate enough to be able to do that, and now they're getting out of town. They should have gotten out of, I mean, you don't want to say that, I mean, right? But they should have gotten out of town 36 hours ago. I ran into a family who stopped me and said, you know, we were watching you guys all last night on Channel 7. You guys were giving us information about Long Beach and what was going on there, and we were watching it from the comfort of a hotel in Garden City. And I said to a lot of people on the boardwalk, I said, listen, if I wasn't being paid to be here, if I didn't have to be in Long Beach, okay, and I lived here, I would be in a hotel in Garden City or Melville or somewhere, and I would not be here. I would be in a place that had power, and then I eventually would get back to Long Beach and things would be okay. And it was just so, people just didn't seem to get it, and that was the frustration. And we were on the air time after time saying, you've got a certain amount of time, go for it, get out. But these people who stopped me said, we were able to watch what was going on in Long Beach. We saw it on Channel 7 from the comfort of a hotel room in Garden City, and we're so glad we did. They came back to check on their home. First story was wiped out, as I've said. That's a lot of the situation here. But they were really happy that they now have this hotel room, with heat and electricity that they can return to now for the next several days.
Well, and many of those people ended up staying there even after the governor went there specifically late yesterday afternoon.
That's right.
And urged people to leave. All right, Eyewitness News reporter NJ Burkett in Long Beach. Thanks so much for the update. We're going to now go to the Bronx, and that's where Josh Einiger is. He is on City Island. Josh, how are things there?
Not good, actually. That's in 2 words, not good. And here's one of the reasons why. It's a really devastating morning here at this particular restaurant. It's an institution here on City Island, Tony's Pier Restaurant, an oyster bar. You could see what happened to it. It doesn't really bear much more detail than there was water everywhere, but simply no way for firefighters to get close enough to the restaurant with the water to put the fire out. And let's show you some video shot by a guy named Matthew Bryanis, who showed us this video right now. And you're looking at the flames that were just towering over this neighborhood in the middle of a hurricane. They had, 40, 50, 60 mile per hour sustained winds at that point, gusting even more. They had firefighters actually in tower ladders in the wind, trying to direct hoses onto the fire, but they just couldn't get enough pressure at that point because they were so far away from the hydrants that they needed to use. And meanwhile, the whole street was flooded, so they couldn't get any closer than that. I talked to one of these firefighters who was saying basically, it's devastating for these guys. They train to put fires out. And coming back to a live picture, you can see there was nothing they could do to save this business, which is just a tragedy in every possible way. City Island has had a considerable amount of damage, mostly flooding damage, than this fire, of course. And I want to introduce you right now to City Council member Jimmy Vaca and Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz, who are here. And Councilman, I want to start with you real quick. City Island, hardy people, 60% of them didn't evacuate. What are you hearing today?
Well, we have significant outages. Many people here are without electric. Many people are cleaning up basements and much more than basements. Many people have significant damage. This was a storm like no other for people here on City Island and in other parts of my district in Pennyfield Avenue, Locust Point, and Edgewater Park. Low-lying areas were hit like they were never hit before. I was a district manager for a community board for 26 years here before I became a councilman. I remember the storm with no name of 1992. And let me tell you something, this is much more serious, much more dreadful. This will take weeks, months before anything gets back to what we would think of as normal.
Borough President, more universal view of the Bronx. What are we looking at right now in terms of the aftermath? We've heard a lot about Lower Manhattan and Queens and Brooklyn. What are your biggest issues right now?
Well, as I tour the Bronx and as I tour different areas with elected officials like Jimmy Vaca, I've seen a lot of devastation. We know that there are 41,000 plus customers without power in the Bronx. A lot of them are senior citizens, so we have to make sure that those seniors are taken care of, especially those that have medication that need to be refrigerated. And just to see the way that everyone has been working together, whether there's outages or down trees or floods and basements. I just came from Harding Park section of the Bronx where people are helping each other pump the basements, just to see everyone come together and really work as a family, as a team, not just here in the Bronx, but throughout the city of New York. I have to tell you that the administration has been stellar. The information that they've been getting to us has been impeccable. And as we move forward, I think that we just need a little bit of patience. We need to make sure that people stay away from down lines, keep children away from the trees, because it's still hazardous and dangerous. And then we also see, some losses like Tony's Pier, which is sentimental. You can see the people that are here. There's so many memories for me and my family, for so many Bronxites, so many New Yorkers that were made right here in this building. These are the things that really break our hearts here.
What has surprised you the most about this storm and the aftermath?
What has surprised me is that the level of rise in the waves and the sea, the ocean, the amount of flooding. But also, what I've been pleasantly surprised is the level of commitment by the police department, the fire department, the volunteers, all of the people from the emergency response team, the elected officials, the dedication of everyone really coming together. This is truly the best city in the planet, especially during trying times. And that's always, always good to see when we have a crisis such as this one.
Councilman, what do you need right now for your district? What do people need right now from the city and more universally from the federal government?
We need a plan. We need intervention by FEMA. We need to get people to rebuild. We need hope. That help is going to be on the way soon. I agree with Borough President Diaz. I've seen city agencies before, and I've seen them today, and I'm very impressed with the level of commitment. But this will require patience on behalf of a lot of people. This storm was unrelenting. This storm was mean, like nothing else before. And people in New York City never think it's going to hit us. We always seem to escape it, and this time we didn't. This time we took the wrath of it. And this is going to require patience, but it's also going to require a coordination in the days ahead and the months ahead to rebuild.
We were talking about, rebuilding potentially the power infrastructure downtown because of obviously nobody really planned for all of this. How long a process do you think this really is, and how much is it going to cost?
Well, it's going to cost a lot of money. I think Governor Cuomo hit it on the head today when he said that so many of our infrastructures are outdated. We've postponed for many years the infrastructure improvements that we should have made years and years ago. Well, now I think the day of reckoning is here. I think the governor was correct that we really cannot postpone much longer or any longer what we know had to be done, because the MTA, for example, certainly needs infrastructure money so that if this happens again, we are prepared. Our tree maintenance program, we've got to look at our tree maintenance program, and we've got to understand that trees need to be maintained, and if not, they're going to collapse. Too many trees are down. Too many people are without power in non-waterfront areas as well. In my district in Morris Park and Pelham Gardens, they're nowhere near water, but they're without electric today because of tree issues. So we have to look at those variables.
And we also, while we need the assistance of the federal government, we also need to make sure that every level of government is also working to help the small businesses. So a business that has been hit really hard like Tony's Pier, we know they could be back stronger and better. The question becomes when. We can't forget that there are 30, 40 people who have jobs here, and we want to make sure that they continue to provide for their families. So we're going to be assessing everything, whether it's residential or commercial, helping residents as well as small businesses to make sure that the Bronx and the rest of New York City is back and thriving and vibrant.
Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz, Councilman Jimmy Vaca, thank you so much, gentlemen, for talking to us. I know it's been a really difficult day and for taking the time. A difficult day throughout City Island, throughout the Bronx, throughout the whole area, as people trying right now to figure out what's going to happen next. Devastation of huge proportions pretty much everywhere you look. Back to you guys.
Josh, I know there's that roadway that goes out to City Island. I know you got there. I know that the councilman and the borough president got there. Is that roadway open now for residents to be able to get access?
The roadway is open. Yeah, Diana, the roadway's open. People are able to come in and out. But what was interesting yesterday was, Councilman, you said when the surge, before the surge, was yesterday at noon, the roadway in was totally flooded.
Yesterday at noon, you could not get onto City Island because the Pelham Parkway Bridge, before you reach the City Island Bridge, was underwater at 12 noon, because I was there myself. I wanted to come and be here, but I couldn't get onto the island at 12 noon. That was the...
And people who wanted to get off by then were out of luck.
Oh, no. People were allowed to get off. There was a way to get off, not a way to get on. Okay. And that I want to thank the city for. They always allowed us off the island for people to go to friends and relatives. That access was never interrupted.
So, Josh,
thank you guys very much.
As they're dealing with the power, do they want people to stay off the island for right now, or do they want them to come back? What should residents who live there know right now?
Residents who live here pretty much are already back. They're coming back. We've seen a lot of people cleaning out their basements. Look, their basements flood here all the time, especially the people who live closest to the water. And to a certain extent, they're a very hardy bunch, and they are accustomed to a lot of bad weather conditions. And they're all back here for the most part. Okay. And that's fine. The city is telling people they could come back. And, obviously, you're allowed to be here if you can deal with no power and kind of crummy weather conditions. On the other side of the island, we saw water lines, in people's houses and in businesses that probably came up to around here if you were to stand next to it. That's how much water was you talk about the storm surge and a certain number of feet, but in real life, kind of throughout much of this area, that's how much water was here. And so they've got a lot of cleaning up to do, and they've already started.
Certainly puts it in perspective. All right, Josh Einiger reporting from City Island in the Bronx. We appreciate it. All day long, we have been showing you these dramatic rescues that have been happening in Little Ferry, New Jersey. Well, many of the people who have been rescued have been taken to a shelter in Teterboro, and that's where Nina Pineda is right now. Nina.
There are about 500 very cold, very wet, very scared people. A lot of tears going inside, inside the Bergen County Technical School, which has been used as a temporary shelter. And I cannot believe the amounts of people that still continue to get dropped off here. This is one of the trucks that just pulled up, and a number of people got off, including a small child. This is run by Little Falls, Total, and Woodland Park, Passaic Valley Emergency Management. But there's also been National Guard trucks. There's been DPW trucks from various boroughs around here, just loaded to the gills with different people. Joy Ortiz is going to come join us now. She was rescued from her home in Little Ferry, wound up here at the shelter, and you just were shaking your head at me. You look like you're...
It's devastating. It's devastating. You know, instead of raising up the toll prices and stuff like that, the governor needs to come in here and build a dam, because what the people of Little Ferry are going through is devastating. This is a nightmare. This is beyond any words.
You told me that you've had to rebuild and lost everything a number of times to a flood.
This is the 5th time that we have rebuilt. We left the home with 7 feet of water in the basement, rising to the 2nd floor. We had to relocate to the 3rd floor. A neighbor was the one that came and took my family out on a boat to get us down, and an ambulance brought us here.
Let me tell you, Joy, you were rescued by your neighbor's boat after you and your family ended up on the 3rd floor?
Yes,
so
correct.
The water came up to the 1st and 2nd floor in your Little Ferry home?
Yes, correct. I don't even have any words.
What time did the rescue happen?
It happened about 11 o'clock this morning.
I know, it's hard to keep track of time.
Yeah.
But were you just keeping an eye on it? Did you not think you had to evacuate? Well,
no, I mean, you know, because this is our 5th flood, this was our 5th flood, you know, we wanted to stay in the house. We thought we were going to be secure, but the water kept rising and rising and rising. And I said, you know what, there's nothing more that we can do. Let's just go to the 3rd floor.
So from the 3rd floor, were you able to get a cell phone signal out? How did you get your neighbor to get
I actually opened the window and had to wave like an SOS to call him to come over to us. Good thing he was the only guy on the block with a boat.
And he brought you here?
He brought us to the end of Main Street in Little Ferry, and an ambulance brought us over.
Oh, thank goodness you're safe. I mean, that's just part of the stories that we're hearing here at the shelter, where about 500 people, according to county exec Kathleen Donovan, have been in and out. Let me show you some of the other vehicles. This is a Borough of Little Ferry a bus. That blue bus you're seeing in there was loaded, filled with people. And every National Guard truck that came in through here, every dump truck, was filled with people. And this young man, you're a student at Bergen Catholic, you told me, Freddie?
Yes.
And you got rescued by actually Moonachie DPW in one of their dump trucks.
Yes, I did.
How did that happen?
Basically, they were driving around making sure everybody's okay, and they come down our block. They come down our block because my little brother actually may have had appendicitis, but he doesn't have it anymore. They checked him out. They said he doesn't have it. He just has abdominal pain, maybe like gas or something. But they came to evacuate us for that reason, and they grabbed, I'm going to say, another about 10, 15 people off of my block.
And what street were you on?
Silva Place.
Silva Place?
Yes.
And you said if you would have tried to walk out of there yourself, Freddie, the water at one point was chest high, and your little brother is shorter than you. Come on over here, little brother. Are you feeling okay?
Yeah, I'm feeling better now.
Did you get checked out by the EMS inside?
Yeah, they said that I either needed to get more sleep or I just had a stomach virus that they eventually got to do something about.
All right, and your brother left the house in his pajamas, but he said your mom told you to pack a bag last night. And so at one point, were you considering walking out, Freddie, but you thought it was too dangerous with how high the water was?
The only reason why I would have walked out was to